So I'm going to be opening up our college prep workshops. So this is a series of workshops that we'll be going through all the different things you'll need to know to prepare yourself for college, get through high school, and go on with your life. And there's a lot that we're going to be covering. So we're going to have 4 different workshops, and we're going to start with mine on essay writing tonight. First, we're going to have the topics that I'll discuss in tonight's workshop. There you go. Okay, so we're going to be discussing the primary academic paper format types. So this includes MLA and APA. Those are the 2 that we'll be going through. And then we're going to go through the main types of essays because, as you already know in high school or whatever grade you're in, we're going to be going through, or you're already going through, a ton of different types of essays, and it's not going to change in college. You're going to have to write several different types of essays, so it's really important to know what all the different types are. And then we're going to go through plagiarism and how to avoid it, because already in high school, just like with essays, plagiarism is a big thing to avoid, and in college it becomes even more serious and even more important to avoid. And then we're going to be learning about a software that you may not have heard of called the Perla software. And I don't want to go too much into that yet, because you'll hear more about that in a little bit. And then finally, we're going to be going through how to effectively research for a topic and find credible sources. So let's get right into it with our primary academic paper format types. First, we're going to be going through MLA format. So MLA format, or MLA, stands for the Modern Language Association. And this paper format's often used for a lot of the things like language arts, language studies, literature, culture studies, and all that stuff. And I'm guessing a lot of the students here have seen that in their English class or their literature class. Many people have had to write essays, and I'm guessing all of you have had to write essays in MLA format, including book reports. So what are the typing guidelines for MLA format? So these are the stuff you have to have set in stone. You have to have a 12-point legible font, and nearly all teachers nowadays require you to have Times New Roman, and you must keep this font throughout your entire essay unless you're specifically asked to not do so. And your paper must be double-spaced, and each period is followed by 1 space, and each new paragraph is introduced with a 1/2-inch indent. Now 1/2 inch is equal to clicking tab once or pressing space 5 times. Tab is easier, so you can just go with that. And in the top right corner of your page, you have to have your last name and the page number. And this will be 1/2 inch from the top of your page. And we'll go through the margins a little bit more later on. And now let's go into our paper outline. So as I said, here are margins. So all around your paper, you're going to have 1-inch margins. That means your writing or your words are going to be 1 inch away from the edge of the paper, except for your page number in the top right, which is 1/2 inch away from the page. And in the top left, we're going to have your full name on one line, and then we're going to go down and have your teacher name, and then we're going to have the class name that you're writing this paper for, and then we're going to have the date that it is due. And the date should be written in day, month, year format. So as I put it here, you put the day, 19, then you put the month, and it's fully spelled out, no abbreviations, so February, and then you put the year, 2006. And remember that this is the day that your paper is due, not the day that you start on it. And unlike other paper formats, there is no title page, and the title of your work is going to be right under all those 4 other lines. It's going to be center aligned, and it should not be bolded, italicized, enlarged, or any of that stuff. Your title is going to be just like the rest of your essay. It's going to be in 12-point font, and unless you have like a book or an article in your title, you can italicize it. But if there's no odd exceptions like that, your title should not be changed in any way. And this page number format listed previously with 1/2 inch margins in the top right corner of your page should be on every single one of your pages. But none of this other stuff. Your title should only be on the first page, and your top left stuff should also only be on your first page. So now, let's have some interaction from the crowd. Let's find our error in our title here, or in our header. Okay, well this is the trickiest one. We're starting with the hardest one. This one is that it's missing double spacing. Now this is a really hard one to notice, but all your papers in MLA format need to be double spaced, and that has to be maintained through your whole essay, and that includes the header. And Number 2, find the error in this passage. I think you guys got this one.
The title was bolded.
Correct. Always remember that your title should not be bolded unless you're specifically asked to do so, or unless there's a work in it that needs to be bolded. And final one, this one's kind of hiding somewhere. Find the error.
Is it the font on the top right?
Yep, you're right. Remember that you always need to keep the same font throughout your entire essay. In this one, I'm doing Times New Roman, and that's what you're usually going to be asked to do. And that means that we have to keep that font throughout the whole thing. And as you can see in the top right, I put my little page number thing in Arial font, which is not allowed. Okay, and here's a properly MLA formatted first page that I got from Purdue OWL. So as we can see in this, in the top right corner, we have our last name and our page number. And this is 1 inch from the right, but it's only a 1/2 inch from the top. That's the only 1/2 inch margin on our entire paper. And then we have our full name, Beth Catlin. And then we have our teacher's name right under that. Then we have our class right under that. Then we have our date. Then we have our title, center aligned. And then we have all our other stuff. So perfectly done. Now let's go through citations. This is how to cite a work in your text. So whenever you're doing an in-text citation, which is what we call these, or a parenthetical citation, that means you have to be in author page style. And this is really easy. All you have to remember is after you do a quotation, you have to have the author's name and then the page number. So I have The Count of Monte Cristo, a really nice book, as my example book, and we have this quote right over here. Dantes began his vengeance by declaring, "None will escape my wrath, and all will feel the crushing fists of vengeance." Dumas 892. As you can see, after our quotes, we put in parentheses the last name of the author, Dumas, and then the page number that it was in. So author page style, very straightforward. And also your punctuation is always going to be after that citation, as you can see over here. Okay, and if you reference to the author's name or page number in the sentence of your citation, then you don't need it in your citation. So as you can see, instead of it being like my first one, this time I said, Dantes began his vengeance when Dumas wrote blah, 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 blah. So instead of me putting Dumas in the end here with the citation, because I have Dumas's name here already, I don't need to put the author in there. I could, but that would be a little redundant and it's not required. And if the author's name is not known, then you just put the name of the work. And if it's a long work, they say to put the shortened name of it in the citation. So just like these ones, I had the same quote, but I put the name of the work, The Count of Monte Cristo, instead of the author and page number. And more in-depth guides to in-text citations will be found in the sources page. And to put it simply, it'll be found at Purdue OWL. That's where you find everything regarding MLA format and how to cite things in MLA format. Okay, citations number 2, how to format your works cited page. So your works cited page is similar to previous MLA page formatting, and this is stuff you're going to have in your entire paper. It needs to be double spaced. You have to have that last name and page number in the top right corner. And remember, nothing in your top left, that's only on the first page. And just like the first page, you're going to have a title that's kind of centered at the top, except this time the title is going to be works cited. And after you get your works cited there and your page number, next up you have to put your hanging indent. Now this is a really cool thing. It's like a normal indent, except instead of your first line being indented and everything else being normal, this time your first line is not indented and everything else is indented. So it's a little weird, but I'll show you in a couple slides how it works. And here's a general form for citing how to format your works cited page that I got via Purdue OWL. And it shows kind of how you format them, I guess. So you first put your author and then a period. Then you put the title in quotations. This refers to articles and things with that, like if you go to a website. And then title of container in italics. And this also includes books. So if you're citing a book, you don't put it in quotations, you put it in the italics over here. And then other contributors, this could mean like a translator, like someone who translated the work, or someone who like kind of helped him and stuff like that. And then version edition, because several works can have different editions or versions. That kind of explains itself. And just like that, there's volume and number. And then the publisher of the work, like Penguin House, there's a lot of really notable publishers, and you kind of see this on your book most of the time. But if you can't, you can often just look it up online, and it's a pretty easy thing to find. And then your publication date, and this is only required if your work was published before 1900. So if it was after 1900, you don't need to worry about that. And then you need your location, and then your date of access. And then you have to have your URL, or they have page or paragraph and all that if you're trying to be really specific. Like if you only want to cite for one paragraph in a poem or something, or if you only want to cite for one page. Usually I just cite the entire work though, that's much easier. And the URL, that's just the website link, but you don't need to put the HTTPS, so just remember that. So here's our little example from Purdue OWL. So, or not from Purdue OWL, I wrote it and I cited Purdue OWL. So in the top right corner, you can see my last name and the page number. And then we go down a line and there's our title, works cited page. And then you have my citation. So does anyone notice anything off about this? Okay, I guess I'll give this one away. It's, oh, my bad. It's that I wrote works cited page is my title. But whenever you have this, all you have to do is works cited. And now we have a little activity. Help me cite the Count of Monte Cristo in my works cited. So we're gonna have this paragraph that gives you all the information you're gonna need. The Count of Monte Cristo, written by Alexander Dumas, has been beautifully translated into English by Robin Buss. This edition was published by Simon & Schuster on May 14th, 2004. And here's the general format to look over. And I'll bring this up in the next slide, so don't worry about trying to memorize that. Okay, so I guess before we get to any of this citation, can somebody tell me what we need to have on our page that's not a citation?
Title?
Yep, good job. And then we're gonna need something in the top right corner as well.
Is it the last name and the page number?
Correct, good job. We're on a roll so far. Okay, now let's get to our citations. And this is not too bad. It kind of tells us how to do it in the bottom. So first, author. Does this work have an author? And if so, what is the author's name?
Would the author be Dumas?
Correct, good job. And we do last name and then first name. So we have the first part of our work cited, Dumas Alexander. And then, because this is the book, we skip the quotation mark title and we go straight to our title of container. And what would this book be called?
The Count of Monte Cristo?
Good job. So far, so good. Now we have a tricky one coming up. Next, are there any other contributors to this book?
Yes. It's Robin Buss.
Yeah, good job. I thought I would trick you guys with that one. Remember that translators count as contributors, so if there's a translator for the book, remember to put his name or her name there as well. Whoa, whoopsies. And next we have version edition. There's none of that. There's no number. Is there a publisher?
I believe the publisher is Simon & Schuster or Schuster?
Schuster, yeah, you got it. Okay, now we're on to the final straw. A publication date. Will we need a publication date on this? No, not on this one. So if your work was published after 1900, you actually don't need to put your publication date. So for this one, we can kind of let it go. But I'm happy I tricked you guys with that one. I tried to sneak in the date there. Okay, and then we don't have a location, we don't have the page, paragraph, or URL, and we don't have the date of access. So great job, guys. There's our works cited page, or part of it at least. Okay, now we're on to APA format. So APA stands for the American Psychological Association. And these works are often for the social sciences like economics, psychology, and business. And I like to call this scientific writing because you see this in science. And then here are APA format typing guidelines. Just like in MLA format, you're going to have 12-point font, and Times New Roman is recommended, and you must use the same font for the entire essay, and it should be double spaced, one space following each period, half-inch indents to introduce each new paragraph. It sounds just like MLA format so far, so not too bad. But then we get something new with the running head. So this is going to be your paper's title, and it's going to be in all caps, and it's going to be at the top of every single page. And for your first page, you're going to have running head, and then you're going to have your title. And just like MLA, you're going to have your page number at the top right of each page. So all you really need to remember for this is it's the same as MLA format except for the running head, which we'll kind of get into more later on. So here's our APA format paper outline. This page is the title page, so it'll be the title of your paper. And then first we have our running head. So as we see, we wrote running head, and then we had our title in all caps. And this is not centered, and it's at the top of your page, and it's a shortened title of your page. They say under 50 characters is what Purdue Owl put it as. And you're going to have your page number in the top right corner, but as you also may have noticed, there's not a last name with the page number on this one. And then you're going to have your full title, as you can see in the middle. And then after that is your full name, and then your institutional affiliation. This is basically where you wrote your paper. If you wrote it for or with Purdue University, as Purdue Pete did over here, you would put Purdue University. And everything's centered except for your running head. There you go. Now here's our abstract. So the abstract is basically just a really brief summary of your entire paper. This is kind of like a general overview, and this is a page that follows right after your title page. So it's basically all you really need to know for it is that this is whenever your running head kind of changes. So instead of running head with a colon being at the beginning of it, now it's just your shortened title at the top. And then under that, you write the word abstract and you center it, and then you write your abstract. So this is a pretty easy one too. So there you go. And then here's your main body. Now this is going to be your main work. This is what your entire essay is about. So it's going to be the same font everywhere, just like in APA format guidelines. It's going to be double space. It's going to be 5-space indents. So we already know all of that. You're going to have your running head at the top, and the first page should have the title centered under the running header. So that's just like everything we've already kind of went through too. And then you're going to have your main body. And also you may have noticed that on our abstract, we actually did not indent at the beginning of it. And then here's our references. So this will contain your sources and references used in your paper. So just like in MLA format, we're going to have hanging indents. And for APA, it's a little easier to remember the structure of it. All you need to remember is you're going to have your author, then your date, then your title, then your source. And it's going to be in alphabetical order. I forgot if I said that for MLA, but MLA is also in alphabetical order. So for your author, you're going to have the last name, then the first name, then the middle initial. And then the journal name and volume number will be in italics. And for the titles, and this is a little weird, but you only capitalize the first letter, proper nouns, and any letters after a punctuation mark. So it looks really weird the first time you see it, as you can see in the sources here, but you'll get used to it. And that's it for the two types of paper formats that you'll need to know. And of course, there's other types of formats, but these are the two most important ones and the two that you're going to widely use in your paper styles throughout college. Next up, let's go to the types of essays. This is going to be a really straightforward one, and we're just going to go through a really broad overview of what these essays kind of have in them. So we're going to just go through the very broad ones: expository, narrative, descriptive, and the persuasive and argumentative. So expository is a genre of essay that requires a student to investigate an idea, evaluate evidence, expound on the idea, and set forth an argument concerning that idea in a clear and concise manner. So, to put it shortly, you're just explaining something in great detail to your reader. Now, these types of essays need a thesis statement, body paragraphs, and a good conclusion. So this is basically most of the essays you've been writing already in school, so you should know this one pretty well. And also your essay needs to give a complete argument. So a good way to think of it is to imagine that you're explaining COVID and its effect on the world to your friend who's never heard of COVID, which is a little weird. But you wouldn't stop in the middle of your conversation on something like that. You can't explain kind of how COVID got spread and just stop right there. That's not going all throughout COVID. You have to explain all the different parts of it and go fully through the entire thing. You have to expand on it. You have to have those body paragraphs to kind of go through all the different parts of it. So just remember, you can't just stop in the middle. You got to go through the whole thing. So now let's do some expository practice. And I don't expect you to read this entire little paper here. We're just kind of going to see, as a quick overview, which element it is missing. So first, is there a thesis sentence or a thesis statement? And remember, the thesis statement will often just be found around the beginning of your essay or in the first paragraph. No volunteers? Okay, I'll go through this one. It does have a thesis sentence or a thesis statement. And you can tell this because this is basically just telling your main idea, your main statement, and your main things that you'll be going through in the essay. And the first paragraph does that perfectly. Now, are there body paragraphs in this paper? And I know you guys can do this one.
Yes.
Yep, good job. As we can see, and they even bolded them for us, there's a body paragraph for exercise and sport, artistic pursuits, and relaxation. Now, is there a complete detailed argument? And this kind of goes with the body paragraphs.
Yes.
Yep. You have 3 body paragraphs. They explain 3 different parts of what we're going through on ways students can spend their leisure time. And they have a complete detailed argument on that, so perfect. And is there a well-built conclusion? And remember, to look for this, you just go straight to the bottom of your paper and see if it kind of closes in on all those different topics. There is no conclusion in this. They do a great job going through their body paragraphs. They have a great introductory paragraph, but they don't have a conclusion. And in most expository essays, you're expected to have a conclusion. Now there's a narrative essay. Narratives are a story. That's the easiest way to put it. And this has several different elements, which again, you've all heard of. There's the plot, or what happens in your narrative, the characters or the people that are going to be in your narrative, the point of view, the perspective from which you're telling your narrative, first, second, and third person, the setting, which is the location or where your narrative is taking place, the theme, which is a central message or what you're trying to get across in your narrative, and the conflict, which is the main problem faced by the characters in your narrative. And a lot of the broad examples is like man versus self, man versus man, nature, supernatural, technology, and society. You see those conflicts a lot in narrative essays. And you can think of narrative essays as a book, basically. That's kind of how I think of them. Whenever you're writing a narrative essay, just kind of feel like you're writing a short little book. Awesome. And in descriptive essays, these basically just describe the essay, and you can see that in the title, descriptive. So this is the type of essay in which you describe something. It can be a person, place, idea, object, or anything else. These have a definite idea or topic for an essay, or that's something you need to have for it, and a thesis is recommended. And you're going to see a thesis in a lot of the academic essays. That's kind of what they center around, the thesis, body paragraph, conclusion format. And as you can kind of see from the title, you need vivid descriptive language in these. You want to make your essay very detailed. That's what you're kind of trying to get across, and as clear as possible. You should use imagery and make use of the 5 senses to help describe. And you have to have your essays put an impression on the reader and make them kind of leave with something after reading your essay. So we have Let's Help Jimmy. So Jimmy wrote a sentence on his descriptive essay about the peculiar weather yesterday. So we wanted to help him make it more vivid, and we had to use stronger words and include sensory details. So Jimmy's sentence was, yesterday it was really hot outside and there were a lot of pretty butterflies. Before bed, they all left my backyard. Now that's not a bad sentence, but we could make it stronger. So we have, yesterday I could feel the searing hot sun striking onto my skin as I watched the pristine scene in front of me. There were hundreds of magnificent monarch butterflies swirling around the lush garden, and they all shared the same stunning beauty. As the yellow blaze of the sun slowly subsided, the little yellow flashes of butterflies also began to die down, and by the evening they all withdrew from my yard. Now that's a good one as well, but always remember you don't want to overuse descriptive words as well. That kind of makes your essay sound a little too extra and kind of veers it off course. So kind of find a good balance between being too descriptive and being not descriptive enough. So that should help Jimmy though. And now let's go to argumentative. And just like descriptive essays, you can see what these are about just from the title, argumentative. They argue. You're trying to take a stance on an issue and you're trying to argue for that perspective. So the thesis of an argumentative essay is really important. You have to put the topic into question format, then give your answer. And you follow this with the contrasting argument to your stance, then follow with the reason that you don't agree with that stance. And if any of you have taken an AP history class, you kind of see this a lot in the AP history thesis statements. You have to kind of have that nuance. You have to say, despite this is blah, blah, blah. So you have to kind of say what you're arguing against, then talk about what your statement is. And then you have to give points on why you believe your statement is better than the opposing statement. And then you go through your 3 main points, just like a standard thesis. So there's 4 types of argument claims. There's fact on whether something's true or false. There's definition, which is just a literal definition of your claim. There's a value or the importance of your claim. And then there's the cause and effect, which is kind of the cause of the problem you go through and what that affects. So there you go. Those are our types of essays. Of course, a very broad overview of them. And next we're going to go into plagiarism and how to avoid it. So what is plagiarism? I feel like all of you could answer that. Plagiarism is when one uses somebody else's words or ideas without properly crediting the original author. And as you see here, I put this in quotation marks and I properly cited the author or the site in parentheses. So this is not plagiarism. But if I didn't put the quotation marks there and I didn't cite the site, then it could become a very serious offense. If I, for example, publish something like this to my university and I didn't put quotation marks here, that could lead to me getting a suspension and a possible expulsion for plagiarism offenses if I do them a lot. And plagiarism can result in this in high schools, universities, the workplace, basically anywhere throughout your career. And along with getting you in trouble at the place you're at right now, it could tarnish your reputation in general. And more serious offenses could even land you in legal trouble if you're doing something like violating copyright laws. And really the easiest way to put it is plagiarism is bad. So how do I avoid plagiarism? First up, you cite your sources properly. When quoting text from a different source, you have to be sure to properly cite it. And if you're wondering, how do I properly cite this? Just cite based on the format style your paper is in. And we just went through that. So for example, if we're citing a book in MLA format, we're going to do it like this. If we're citing Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, we have our author, then the title, and then we have our publisher, and we put the date, but as you guys know, we didn't need the date on this one. And number 2, include quotations. That's like the most important part, and that's what often causes plagiarism. A lot of people just forget to put their quotations or forget to properly do them. And that could basically put you in trouble with plagiarism. So when directly citing a text, it must be added through quotation marks. And depending on your paper's format style, you might need more. Because as we know, in MLA format, we're going to need our author's last name and the page number. So as you can see, we have our include quotations here. Harry's grand adventure began when Hagrid first declared, "Harry, you're a wizard." And number 3 is paraphrasing. So sometimes you might not want to directly quote your text, and you might just want to paraphrase it, which is basically whenever you put it in your own words. We have to be really careful when you do this, though, because there's a really fine line between paraphrasing and plagiarizing. So you have to be really careful. And you'll still need to properly cite the source, though, because you're still using the source in your work. There are some exceptions to this, but for the most part, you'll still need to. Maybe at the end of your essay, or as I put it here, I just put rolling 55 here as well. And then an extra tip. and this is something I do to avoid plagiarism, because usually I just get really worried that I'm going to forget to put a source in my thing. Maybe I went through it, but I kind of forgot to include it at the very end. So just always keep a list of your used sources. And oftentimes when moving to your works cited list, as I said, there may be several that you forget that you used in your paper, and though you didn't have bad intentions, it could lead to consequences. So for example, for this workshop, there you go. So this is how I usually organize them. You put your title and then you put all your sources just like this, so you have them all saved here. So just doing something like that could really save you from trouble with plagiarism, and it could help you organize your sources as well. So now let's move on to the Perla software. So first you might be wondering, what is Perla? So Perla is a Microsoft Word add-in that allows you to write MLA and APA formatted papers quickly, easily, and effectively by handling your references, citations, page formatting, and more. So first, I guess we'll go through how to do the Perla stuff. So first, we're going to go through how to format a title page with Perla. So first, you have to click the Perla tab on your Word document. You click title page, you fill in all the necessary information, and there you go. That's really easy. So let's try it. We're on Perla, we click title page, and it brings us here, and we have to click create research paper. And look how easy that is. We just have to click whatever we're going to do. Let's do it in MLA format because we all love MLA format. And now somebody give me a title, whatever title you want.
Climate change production, plastic pollution effects on climate change.
Awesome. There you go. And they already have my name as the author. And then for our course number, I guess we'll put MADYF. MADYF 2021. We'll put Mr. Jones as our instructor. And for our due date, we'll make it due today. And look at that. A click of a button. And there you go. We have our title, our name, our instructor's name, our class name, our due date, our title, and everything. We have everything perfectly formatted. And something to remember for this, don't use it as a crutch. Don't use this to basically just do all the work for you. Make this more like a tool that you're utilizing. This is going to help strengthen your knowledge on the different format types, and it's going to help you develop. Don't just use it and not try to learn it all. You want it to positively impact you. You don't want it to just kind of harm you. And then how to write references with Perla. So you thought you were done, but there's even more Perla can do. If you click the Perla tab and go to citations and references, all you have to do is just fill in the information they ask you for, and you basically get your full reference written out and saved right in the corner. And this will help you organize them for your works cited page, and this helps you like keep all of them right there for you. So as I showed you, I made a Word document with all my different citations, and I was thinking I was organizing it well. And then you can have it right there, saved right with your paper. So it's really great. So I guess I'll show you guys how to do that. We go to references and citations, create a new reference, and then you can look up a reference. So I was wondering if anybody has a book that they really like that they want me to look up.
Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Nice one. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Whoa. And as you can see, for some reason, that one's showing a lot of responses. That was happening on some of mine because it shows all sorts of different papers with that, so it's a little difficult with certain works. But other works, it works much easier with. As you can see, Dracula by Bram Stoker. And all you have to do is click use this work, and I'll use this one as an example. You click if you want to use all or part or certain parts of the book or a volume of it. That basically helps because as I showed you earlier, you can make it a specific part of your book, but usually it's just easier to put all of your book. Then you put your type, and then look at that. They put everything for you already. They have this guy who edited the book for us already. They basically give you everything. So sometimes you don't even have to put in the stuff yourself, so it's really awesome. Then you click next. They give you a preview of what it'll look like in the citation, so that's already amazing. Then you click create. There you go. Now you have it saved right here for you, perfectly made and formatted. And then whenever you need it at the end, or if you need to reference to it, it'll be right there for you. So pretty awesome. So now you all know how to use the Perla software, and I highly recommend trying to get it or getting it if you would like to improve your MLA formatting or APA. It uses all different sorts of formatting, and all of us at MADYF already have been using this software, and we've all been benefiting from it. Now, number 5, we're going to go through our last section, which is how to effectively research. So first, you have to identify your topic and potential sources. Of course you need this before you research, right? So to effectively research, you have to have a solid understanding of what your topic is and what you are asked or what you are tasked with delving into. And after choosing that specific topic, you first do a kind of broad overview and analysis of it online. You kind of search it up and kind of look through and see if there's good sources that you can go by for that topic. And we'll be going through what a good source is defined as later on. So I put this picture here, the tomb of a diver. This is a really old Greek painting, and this just kind of made me think of it. I just kind of thought of this as being the ground and a diver jumping off, and I mean, it's not really nice to be a diver if you don't know what you're diving into. I mean, if you're just diving into the ground, you're not going to have a very good time. So you kind of want to know what you're delving into before you go into it, and you want to know how to get yourself ready for that. So then we have our website domains. That's the first thing you have to look for credibility in your sources. So we have 4 different types here, .com, .org, .gov and .mil, and .edu. And I didn't put .net. That's basically for networking. And that usually falls in the same category as .com for credibility. So I'll go through those together kind of over here. So those two are used, or .com is used for businesses, sales, services, and news. .com and .net are not the best for website domains that are credible. These should only be used for base level information and are not recommended for most in-depth research, because as you know, and as you can kind of already see from what those sites are made of, there can be a lot of bias or a lot of untrustworthy work inside it. Especially with news sites, you see a lot of bias, and some of the stuff you can't really use for a real research paper. Next, you have .org. But that doesn't mean that you don't use .com. .com can still be really useful if you need some really general information on a topic. And if you can trust the .com source, then of course you can use it. It's not like all .com sources are not credible. And then there's .org, and this is for organizations. Just like .com, if you know the source and you're certain it's trustworthy, you may use it. But just like .com, there are some of these that may contain biases. Though I do feel like this is better than .com because these are organizations and some of them are more credible. And there are a lot of .org sites that are credible that I'm guessing you all know of. So don't be too scared away from them, but these 2 last ones are really good for research. And I recommend these over the first 2. So next we have .gov and .mil. This is basically government or military, US government or military owned sites. These are really reliable because, of course, they're government owned, and they largely do not contain bias or misinformation, and they go really in depth on certain topics, so they're really good if you're trying to find good sources. And then finally, there's .edu, which is from a college or university. And just like in .gov and .mil, these give really good accounts on different topics. And these especially go even deeper into them because they're university published. So they're some of them are really going deep into these different topics. And they largely don't contain bias, but you have to be careful because a .edu site could be student or faculty published. and those could contain bias, so just be on the lookout. But for the most part, there's not really much to worry about. And then we have author credibility. So the best way to determine the credibility of a source sometimes is just by determining the credibility of its author. And many reliable sources are sure to include details about the author. Some of the stuff you read, especially on EDU sites, it'll say written by this person, and maybe it has MD at the end of their name, or it has doctor at the beginning of your name. And they kind of give a description of all the different things that that person did. So you really got to look for all that stuff. Degrees is a big one. Fields of study, if they're going through and they've had a lot of experience in the field that they're writing about, those are all really good signs. So if you're never really positive on if a source is trustworthy, like maybe if you're reading about an .org site and you're like, I don't know, then be sure to check the author. And another way of telling is sometimes they may not even include an author. So check for that as well. And then we have our final thing. Pranav wants to write a research paper on the effects of electronic devices on the sleep cycle. Which are the best sources for me to use? So you guys got to help me with this one. I got a pretty big research project coming up and I need to know which sources to use. First, we have howtolucid.com, who published How Electronics Affect Your Dreams, The Scary Truth, and they had no authors cited under them. Should I use this source?
No.
Yep, I think it's pretty obvious that I should not use this source. Of course, there's a chance that it is credible, and there's a chance that it has factual information, but it's a .com and it doesn't have much credibility on the outside, and I'm pretty sure I can find some better sources if I look deeper into it. And now next we have How Electronics May Influence Speech. This may influence sleep. This is by sleepfoundation.org, and it was medically reviewed by Dr. Kimberly Trong. Should I publish or should I use this source?
I would, because it's been medically reviewed
Yep.
by a professional, a doctor in this case. And my assumption is it's a sleep doctor.
Yep, you're right. So though it is a .org site, like I said, just because it's .org doesn't mean it's not credible. A lot of .org sites are credible and they could actually be good organizations that may have a field that goes into your topic. And this is the perfect one, sleepfoundation.org. And it was medically reviewed by a reliable person, Dr. Kimberly. So that kind of shows that this is a reliable source, it's been reviewed, and you could use this in your paper for sure. And next up, we have Bedtime Use of Technology and Associated Sleep Problems in Children from ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. And this was actually written by 4 authors, and they all have MDs. So anyone have a guess on if I should use this or not?
Definitely, it's a government site.
Mm-hmm. So even before I see that the authors are all credible, I can already see that this is a government-owned site, so that already gives it its own credibility, and the authors give it even more. So that's a perfect site to use. So out of these 3, I will for sure use second and third. The first one, I might need to research a little further to see if it's credible before just using it off the bat, or even using it at all. And then here's my final tip on research, and this is a little site called Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is just an online branch of Google, and it basically just includes a huge field of just scholar works that were published, or anybody, just published works basically. And many of these works give really good information and go really in depth on really specific information. And they're also really reliable and written by people with degrees and good knowledge in the fields. But of course, that does not mean that everything on Google Scholar is reliable. Most are very useful, but that doesn't mean they'll all be completely credible. There's no filter on Google Scholar, so there's all sorts of stuff that could be coming into it. So for example, on the topic that I was using, effects of electronics on sleep, I looked it up, and I already got results, and all of them had credible sources. I checked on the first one. It gives their own source. It gives the author. It talks about what the author has under his or her name, and then it gives the work. And as you can see on the left, you can choose when it was published. You can sort by when it was published, and you can take out patents, citations, all of that. So there's a lot you can do on this. There you go. Now, I guess for anyone who's really interested in a topic, does anyone have a topic they want me to look up to see if it works on Google Scholar?
Social media marketing.
Social media marketing. Oh, wow, it came up very quickly. Oh. And as you can see, you already see a lot of different things on it. You see the titles, you see their credibility. Oh. There you go. And there's all sorts of different sources. So that is one thing. They have a lot of different things posted under it. So you have to watch out because there's no filter, as I said. But usually if you just look at the top sources, you find some pretty good sources on different topics. And just for yourself to read through, some of them are really interesting and in-depth. And that's the end. Does anybody have any questions regarding any part of my presentation tonight?
I would just say with the Google Scholar to check to see if it's a peer-reviewed article, especially if you're using it for a research project. And it would say, once you open up the document, you would see whether it's peer-reviewed or not.
That's a really big thing to look for. And like I said, Google Scholar, you really need to be sure to see how credible the source is, and if it's peer-reviewed, that's excellent.